everybody, ODAT Nerd here, aka Terrence. This is the pre-recorded video that is going to play at the start of every Devember video. So what day is it? If you're watching this on the day that I recorded it, probably a day in December. What day? I don't know. I'm not creating 31 of these things. This is to tell you that we are working on the Devember project, which is a remote build system in Sublime Text. Now, down in the description, if I have done my job correctly, there should be a link to the playlist that has all of the videos in this series, which starts with the video that describes what the heck it is we're actually trying to build here. And this video will be a minimum of an hour long. I don't know how long it's going to go because I haven't recorded it yet. It's still November right now while I'm reading this to you out of my brain. That's not actually written down anywhere. I think that's probably easy to tell. I'm not very good at talking off the top of my head into a camera. So what are we going to be doing tonight? Don't know. Hopefully working on something really interesting, though. Probably should have thought that through a little bit more. In any case, we're going to go ahead and say the following. If you like these videos and you want to know when there's going to be more of them, subscribe to the channel, link in the description. If you're interested in videos that aren't live in nature, there's another channel I have that is going to be providing those. I have in the past and I will again. I'm just not right now because I'm doing this every day for December and it's taking up all my free time. Link to that is in the description. Like any videos that you find useful, comment on any videos if you have any questions, and most importantly, have a good time. So let's go ahead and give it to myself in the present, if you will, to continue on faceless because I don't have the sort of setup that allows me to stream my face while I'm working. Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. ODAT Nerd here. Welcome to this dev stream already in progress, if you will, because I actually spent a little bit of time working on some of this before the stream started for about an hour, but I wasn't focusing solely on this. I was also doing some other things as well. And apologies up front, but I have had sort of a persistent, naggy, dry, non-productive cough for a large part of the day, and I feel little tickles in my throat, so apologies in advance if any of them accidentally get out without me muting the microphone. So what are the things that I did today? Well, one thing was I installed .NET Core 2.2 on my machine here and on my Windows laptop where I did some of the development for tonight before I shuffled it over to here. Um, just because I learned there was the latest version. I was using, like, when I first started this way back end of November as I was getting day 0 code ready. The most recent released version was 2.1.200 or something along those lines. And now 2.2.101 is the at least the most recent Linux version. So I went ahead and installed that. But I also did some other things as well. One of those things actually was getting myself reacquainted with Git Bundle because I did this development originally on my Windows laptop while I was sitting on the couch, and that particular machine doesn't have the appropriate key to be able to talk to GitHub to check code in. So while I was able to clone via HTTPS, I didn't have any immediate recourse for committing, so I just bundled my changes and manually FTP'd it to this computer and then fetched the changes out of the bundle. It's been a while since I've done that, but I am working on some Git training at work, so I thought I might as well bone up on that a little bit, if you will. And as we can see, if this is the code as of the end of day 17, then I have already made a few changes here. Including one unstage change there, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So what did I do? Continuing with the notion of stupid throat. Continuing on with conversations between the client and the server to try and get our flow working and see how that is going to work. Let me just resettle the headset here for a second. There we go. I wanted to clean up the code and get ready to do that. And so I did make some changes here. And as we can see, one of those changes is previously the method. What did I do? That. There are a bunch of changes here. Well, we'll do it this way. I guess that's sort of a nicer way to look at it if I turn that off. The encode method was named with a lowercase e, and I'm trying to adhere to the coding conventions of C# when I'm working in C#, obviously. And there, it seems like the way to go is for everything to be uppercased, which I find mildly disturbing because that seems more like a Visual Basic kind of thing. But I guess if you have a common language runtime, you sort of need to do something like that. So all of the places where it's defined and the place where it's actually called have been, which is the call point right there, have been changed to use the new version. That's pretty simplistic. Then while I was working on things, and of course I did all of these changes all at once and then sort of piecemealed them out, I realized that this class was not named correctly. There, introduction message, error message, and message. So I changed it. I couldn't remember. I think I might have done that on purpose, but now it irritates me. So I swapped that name everywhere, except you'll notice that I forgot to commit that particular change in, but don't worry, we're going to pick that up in just a second, because the next thing that we wanted to do, and I fixed that message there, as we can see, is I wanted to bring back the notion of a message ID in each individual message. And again, I can't remember if I just never got around to this while we were working on this, or if I had done it on purpose, but I've added it in, as we can see in the iProtocol message, requires that it be a read-only property. All of the classes have it with private set and public get, and set their own appropriate type in. So given an instance of a message, you can look it up, or sorry, you can see what its actual type code is. And I also fixed the constructor there. That sort of annoyed me, but you can only do so much. And then the last thing was this. Now, I actually I made the main build client class as we knew it before a partial class, and instead of immediately echoing the message back when one is received, remember in message is a partial message instance, and what we used to do is we ask the partial message to get a message out of it, which it would do by doing from data, which I think is actually still using the wrong case for things, so we may have to fix that too in just a second. And then it would immediately send it. Sorry, then it would immediately get ready to create a new message for next time. Instead of that, we pull the message out, immediately reset, and then use this new dispatch call on the client to dispatch the message. And that's where this other class comes in. And as we can see, there's a dispatch method here that uses a switch based on the message ID property and calls the appropriate methods in the client up here. Now, I'm pretty sure that is exactly not the exception that you want, but I did not feel like Googling to see what you might use there. And we might also notice that each of these particular items is just echoing the message back the way that it was originally seen, just so this code basically does exactly what it used to do. Now, I don't know if this is the best way to do this, or if this is the quote-unquote C# way to do this. One of the aspects, if you know one programming language and then start learning others, and not necessarily just languages from a syntax perspective, but rolling the standard library, if you will, into the language proper, when you know one and you go to another one, you sort of have a tendency to want to keep doing things the way that you know how they were done in the language you came from, and maybe that's the good way to do it, quote unquote good way, the preferred way. If we were talking about Python code, we would refer to that as the Pythonic way of doing things. There's probably a term like that for C sharp. And other .NET languages based just on the language, the way that the libraries are used. There's probably different design paradigms and patterns that are more common than they are in other languages, or maybe because they are not possible in other languages. That's one of the things that I'm feeling out here. So I don't know that this is necessarily the best way to do it, but based on knowledge that I have, it is a way to do it. And so that's what I've done. And so we have a switch on the type, and we'll notice that we know if this has that type, then probably it's the appropriate type, because those are read-only properties, and we're trusting ourselves as developers not to be a boob or to find these problems really quickly. So I'm using this to typecast things as they're going into here, so each of these can be given exactly the appropriate message type. The other way to do that would be to make all of these methods take an iProtocol message and then cast them later. And for reasons I don't understand, even though this is an iProtocol message and all of these classes adhere to that interface, it can't inherently typecast them. There's probably a good reason for that. Based on my experience in other languages that sort of do similar things, it's not quite what I would expect. I don't think. It's been a while since I've used Java, for example. Um, but that is where we are right now. And as by way of test, we'll note that I have a version of this in the repository or in the package now, where instead of when it gets an introduction message, instead of sending one back, it sends an error message that says invalid protocol version. Now, something I was just pondering as the stream was spinning up is, what do we do with our communications channel in cases where there is an error? Um, we might presume that anytime we transmit an error message using this error message class, that it's like a protocol error or an unrecoverable error, because if it was something that was, say, a warning, like a hey, just so you know, something's going to happen here that you might not expect, we could use a message for that, or we could maybe even make a warning message class if we wanted to do something like that. So does an error message really mean like fatal, unrecoverable error? If it does, then we can modify our sending code so that whenever it finishes sending a message, if it knew that that message was of type error message, then it could, instead of fetching the next message to send, close the socket um, with an orderly shutdown to make sure that that message gets transmitted, and then the connection would automatically be dropped. That's not happening right now. So in this case, if we transmit an error message, then the connection stays open. And that means that two things happen. One, the onus is on the client to realize that it got an error and close the connection, which doesn't seem particularly nice per se. And second, because you can't trust that, the server needs to track error state and respond to any message after it has received an error by transmitting another error saying, hey, there's an error has already happened. Now, my druthers for this is that an error literally means, no, something terrible has happened, it's unrecoverable, you go away now. If we want to portray anything else, we'll come up with a way to do that. So I'm going to say that we actually want the error message to end the conversation. We don't want to put the onus on the client to do that. So we do want the server to do that particular thing. Now the question then becomes, do we do it the way I just said? where the code that's sending says, I just sent an error message. The send is complete. Close this connection now. Or do we do it in a more generic way where a message can have a close after sending field in it that always defaults to false, but you could set it to true, and that gets pulled out um, when the message is transmitted and stashed somewhere so that it knows. That's sort of my thought, but I can't quite remember how this code works. So we're going to jump in now on our hour of code. Once again, we have managed to blow 15 minutes covering things that happen. But I do want these live streams to at least discuss all of the code changes and the reasoning behind them, even if you don't necessarily get to see them happening. The shorter version that just summarizes things and doesn't show any code at all is the devlogs that I'm making after the fact. So just to see this working and in action, if I build the remote build server and I can say, oh, it is unhappy. I think I will need to. Is there a terminus command to kill things? No, there's not. But we can always open a new panel, I guess. Okay. Remote build server .NET run. And there's the connection running. One other thing I noticed while I was testing this on my Windows laptop, it actually has an IPv6 interface, and so the server code listened for connections on the big old hex string of not at all useful, and I had to temporarily fiddle things around. I decided to just leave well enough alone with that for the time being, just because it seems like a more complicated. Do we want to try to listen on all of the interfaces? Do you want the configuration of the server to specify what interface it should listen on? Should it pick one IPv6 and one IPv4 and do something on the two of them? That's all stuff that needs to be done and needs to be thought of, but is not in any way crucial for the purposes of Devember. For the purposes of Devember, we can hack our way around it by forcing it to listen one way or the other as needs rise. So now it's actually listening. When I run the command, we'll see the hello world. And I think I ran this previously, so we'll see that it's connecting to Dart. The connection was established. We got the notification that we connected. Then we got a message. The message was error code 1004 with an error message invalid protocol version, which again is what I put there. And then it went ahead and received the hello world message because remote build.py just goes ahead and sends that as the introduction message and then immediately sends a message after that. So, eek. Stupid, stupid cough. Before we proceed with this, I want to check something because I noticed this while I was working. I am calling this command with host Dart and port 50,000. And those are arguments. And we'll note here that this takes a host and a port. It totally shows the input panel and calls self-test with the host and the port, which are arguments. And then we go ahead and just hard code a host and a port, which will confuse the ever-loving bejesus out of you for a minute when you run it on a computer that's not Dart, for example. Okay, so we're going to do that. We want to clear build output and run it again. And there's our connected. And so it's still doing what we want. So let's go ahead and just check that particular change in this particular file. We'll stage this hunk and say, actually, use the host and port provided. In our zeal to test things out, the command was using a hard-coded port and host to talk to, even though it takes them. Oh, we'll do that. Even though it takes them as arguments and should thus use them. Okay, now let us jump back into let's do this real quick. I not going to do that, huh? All right. Be that way. Ah. I am going to punch somebody. I'm swearing to. What the hell is the command called? Oh, there's no underscore in it. No. Okay. Yeah, there we go. And boop, there we go. We don't want that window to appear in our little taskbar because it's my one off to the side. I guess I could also point out that this is the command that I use to do that. Uses WM control, lets you click on a window, and then it takes it out of the taskbar and out of the Alt tab. I can still see it on that desktop. You can still see it in the pager. I can still interact with it. You can see it has the focus now. Similarly, that window there is my OBS window, but they don't need to. They don't need to be on the taskbar. They're just getting in the way. Gee, now I lost my train of thought. What was I going to do there? I was going to look at build client. I'm going to close this one because I don't think we necessarily need it at the moment. We get a protocol message. We enqueue the protocol message. We call begin sending. Begin sending tries to dequeue and it encodes it. So that means that what we could do, and we'll see how we like this particular feature here, is we'll find, can I do this? There we go. We might have bool close after sending as get. And save that. Now all the messages are going to have to respond to that, and they don't, so that's okay. I probably should have copied that first. Yeah, I guess we probably want the one here. Ooh, that one needs to be writable. Crap. Because you might want to actually set the thing. Or you set a method. Nah, I like the idea of oops. Well, yeah, that is neither here nor handy. Let's go ahead and jump over there. Say we don't want, for right now, any of the Python code open. We'll leave all those files out. Probably, well, we'll leave that. We'll leave well enough alone for that. We're going to be looking at this. It should have a get and a set, let's say. And in message, and oh, where did I put it? I like to keep the orders of things the same. After message ID, you might say false, let's say. And in introduction, which of course is over here because that's the way that works. It goes like so. I'm going to close that for the time being and zoom that window again. And in error goes here as such. So now it should stop complaining about that. Did I not just line 5? Oh. Boy, the number of times I've done that, I swear. And there. There we go. Now, in build client, we might say this is the send buffer, the bytes sent. There might be a private bool. I don't even know why. Well, we'll make it public. These should really be all hidden anyway, but until we know how we want it to work, we'll leave well enough alone for there as well. Close after sending. Is that what I named that for the other thing? Yeah, look at that. How cool is that? I totally did. So we'll come back to the appropriate place. Like so. We're going to copy that and we're going to jump to send. Sorry, we're going to jump to begin sending. If send buffer is null, then try to get something. We do that. We need to say close after sending equals message dot close after sending. So that should be thus. And then we call begin send. And again, we'll copy that. And if, no, that's read callback, send callback, finished message transmission. If close after sending, if client dot close after sending, this is the bit where, why is it even doing that? I don't even know if it has to. Do I have a close method? I don't, do I? Yeah, that's just over there. That's not likely, excuse me, to be handy. What we can do is look way down here at day 0 because way back when this code, when it did ascend, closed the socket. So we might do that. Come back to here. If nothing else, a fantastic reason for always having your code in Git. And sorry, socket, I'm assuming. Socket shutdown, socket close. Because it just finished reading. Now, if anything was trying to write, that may cause an error. We'll deal with those as the time comes. The send is in a try catch block. The read is not because the sample wasn't. So maybe we'll need to add one. That doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And we'll even move that up there so we can see it happening before it otherwise happens. And still building. Nice. We come over to here. And here we might need to say var error equals this. And then error dot close after sending, but with an uppercase, equals true, but not the Python true, because that'll get us in trouble. And then we send error. And as a result of that, we can run this. Now what we're going to do is clear this build output. We're going to run the command, and we get connection established, notification connected, then a message that we were connected, then we receive an invalid protocol error message, and the connection is closed on us. Nice. And if we look over here, this is the bit where I was going to say there is some sort of awful in begin send. Cannot access a disposed object. Now the question might be, did I forget to... I did, didn't I? I need to return out of here because it tried to go back and send the next thing. Oops. So, okay, that's not too terrible. Let's try it one more time. There is the server running. Again, we will go to the remote build output and clear it, run the command, and we see we received an error message. The connection was closed. And over here, still the same thing, huh? Why though? That is an intriguing lazy async result, huh? Did it say? It said closing connection, and then it got mad because in begin send, I don't think that means it got here. I'm not entirely sure. Does that have something to do with... No, that can't, because the code as we saw it here does that. It calls shutdown, then it calls close on the handler, which, as we can see right there, is the socket, and that's in the send callback, and the send callback is from the new async send. So it really seems like that shouldn't be that big of a deal. And it shouldn't actually get that far. Now again, I actually built that, right? Because I have been known to not. That still seems to be, okay, so let's see, dispatched. Oh, look at that, it's in a thread pool, so that's a nice way to figure it out that it's doing that right now, I suppose. Completion callback, protected invoke callback, context aware result. Woo, this is quite the thing. Threading, execution, run internal, blah, 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 lazy, async, result, read, callback, dispatch, handle message, send, begin sending. It really seems like that is the issue. If I return from there, it doesn't get here, right? I notice while I'm listening back to my my streams sometimes that I tap my fingers on the desk a lot while I'm thinking. That does not make for good video, I'm sure. Probably neither does stopping to drink coffee, but that does sort of soothe my throat and make it feel better. So there's that. Now, I really wasn't expecting to get hung up on this. Um, Maybe we might try something like, as a web search, C sharp, tell if socket is disposed. How to check if object has been disposed in C sharp. Socket.available? Is there a method to check if object has been disposed different than trying to do it and catching the exception? I'm using TCP client that has a close method which disposes an object, and this can happen in a piece of code I don't have control of. In this case, I would like to have a better solution. A good way is to derive from TCP client and override the disposing method. Which won't work if the other code created the instance. Then you got to do something desperate like using reflection. None of this is likely to come to a good end. You really did want to write to the TCP port, but you won't. That buggy code you can't control is now in control of your code. You've increased the impact of the bug. Talking to the owner of that code and working something out is by far the best solution. And that is the accepted answer. Well, yeah, that does not really help. Let's back it up. Socket.available property. What does this tell us? The number of bytes available from the network and available for read. Okay. That throws the socket object disposed if the socket has been closed. Huh, that's interesting. um, well, what could we actually do in that particular case to stop that from happening? I'm going to do this just to see if this is actually the case. I'm going to do that. We are built. We are running. And we are seeing what? We're just seeing closing connection. So that would lead us to believe that my code is buggy code and you're not allowed to close a socket, because that may be an issue. The reason I want to do it this way is because we might want to have a goodbye message that the server can use to gracefully shut down a connection, and it's hacky to have this try to do this sort of operation based on the message that it just sent. So this seems like a nicer way to do that. We remove that. Let's go up to begin sending. If send buffer equals null and not close after sending. Oh. Oh, wait a minute. Well, I don't know that it's necessarily being called. If the send buffer is null, then it needs to try to get something to send, which is theoretically smart enough. This works. Okay. The code here assumes our internal state of what we're sending. It begins sending only gets called when you put something into the queue. It calls it and then it calls it again. I don't think that's actually going to fix anything here. I can't imagine why it would. Yeah. I mean, oh, look, now it changed. Did it say that last time? No. I'm pretty sure that's probably just a begin sending at build client line 103. Let's just check where all the places are where begin sending could be called. Why is this panel so tall? Don't search in Python files. If you enqueue a message and the send buffer is not null, it calls it. And it also calls it in response to itself. So it's getting called why? This is an intriguing question. The client is putting the introduction and then immediately putting the other thing. The messages should be handled in order. So when it received the first message, it immediately, oh wait, it's the out queue. It queues up that message and tells it to close after it's done. We really would be nice to have some sort of is disposed kind of thing. Dispose network resources in C#. Whatever code project is, it hardly ever has a good answer. If you want, do not call close, which calls dispose internally, so you don't need to call dispose once you call close anyway. Instead, call disconnect true. What does disconnect do? I mean, that's not something that the other end did. Closes the socket connection and then allows reuse of the socket. Well, that doesn't seem like it's going to be something that we want because once it's closed, it's going to go away, right? Maybe we are going about this in an entirely back-asswards way because the socket starts off at null, and when it's created, it's given a socket. We could do something like socket equals null to get rid of the thing now that we've told it to close. Seems like a good idea. We don't necessarily have to return because we're going to call begin sending again, and we're going to modify begin sending. Not for this, but to say if socket is null, return. Whatever you thought you should do, don't do it because you don't have a socket anymore. Does that solve the world's problems? Nope. Now the problem is cannot access a disposed object. So, I swear. Well, we'll give her one more kick. Let's say we don't do that. Go down to send callback. Whoop, took one too many. We shut down the socket. Do you even need to close it in that case if it's shut down? Maybe that's the thing. Again, the sample program did it, so why would we assume we can't? Yeah, that gets mad too, because now there's a broken pipe. Oh, good, because now we got signal problems, because there's not enough wrong in the world without having to fiddle with something like that. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So if that's going to be the case, close the socket. It doesn't get caught here. It gets caught in the outer in this call. I imagine. Again, I can't help but wonder, what was this doing that we're not? Um, if you got that, it called send to that socket with that. It creates the data. It does a begin send on the data of that length to a send callback. And the send callback, once it knows the write is done, shuts down the socket, calls close. And that's fine. I guess it doesn't call begin send again is something that it doesn't do that I'm doing here. I don't know why that is necessarily a thing. We may have to just, I mean, I don't really want the server bailing every time it decides it wants to close a connection. Don't want the client or the client to have to do it. You really want the server to be the one that does it. Now we're getting stuff. Send, handle, message, dispatch, read, callback. Hmm. Well, it's one last, yeah, let's try one last thing here. Let's pull that. So now it's not trying to do anything, and then we'll go to begin sending. I mean, I'm assuming that anything I do here is wrong. If send buffer is null, that only happens when there's nothing to send. And if we were told to close after sending, then shut down our socket and return. Again, I don't know that that would necessarily cause anything to work any better, except that it's now happening in a different thread, so maybe that makes things a little happier. Nope. So I'm gonna, I guess, put it back to the way I had it. I definitely want that there, and we do want to return. Don't bother calling begin send again. I guess what we could do is brute force this bastard. That would solve the problem. Maybe if we came up to this and said, try. Yeah, you can tell the list of things that are intriguing problems does not include a system that doesn't let you close a socket. Catch exception E error while sending, and then we'll throw that in and say E dot message. Is that even a thing? I mean, I know I've done it before. Even that. Now it's happening in the other one. Okay, well, I actually could have suspected that that was actually going to be an issue. We're really band-aiding things in this particular instance, so I don't even know, how much I care about this at this point. Uh, just one of those, and one of these. This is probably a good lesson in working with a system that you don't fully understand with sample code provided by someone that has absolutely no error checking or any information whatsoever about how anything is working. Error while sending, cannot access a disposed object. Okay, well, it's an absolutely idiotic fix, but at least it doesn't crash. So that's something. I'll try to work out what the appropriate way to close a socket asynchronously. Maybe I should actually just search that. C# close an async socket. How to gracefully close an async server socket? Well, it's not really a server socket, is it? First, I added a boolean called isListening. Next, I changed condition that keeps the ear listening to while isListening. In the stop method, I set the isListening variable to false before calling close. And lastly, I do a check after the manual set event. Okay, so yeah, that is exactly not. Are you sure you're not simply winning a race condition? I'm pretty sure I'm not. Close sends a message to the ear before closing, so when you stop, you leave the loop completely. It's undocumented for some reason, but it does. Okay. How to shut down close asynchronous socket to affect TCP fin. Well, that's in C++, so I don't even know why that showed up in the top 5 searches, Google. Closing socket during async receive. Here, let's bring this over. You can see what I'm looking at. We're trying to write a TCP server that opens a class that wraps a TCP socket when a new connection is made. Everything goes swimmingly except when I try to close the socket during a read and I get, yeah, well, not that error. Begin receive. There's a bunch of really poorly formatted code, so it's unreadable, so we don't need to worry about it. I thought that maybe I can manually call end receive. Okay, well, this is actually happening in end receive, so okay, that's not helpful. Thanks, Barry. What? Yeah, okay. I don't understand that. The whole world is topsy-turvy. Okay, so yeah, we don't need to answer people's questions so much as we need to rail on them for not using the internet correctly. I used to follow the Lua mailing list, but I stopped because it was so frequent that people would either drop into esoteric discussions about features that should be added to the language, or people would ask questions and not get answers because they spelled Lua in all uppercase letters. And Lua is not an acronym, it's the Portuguese word for moon. And apparently, people that get that part wrong aren't worthy of help. And in the end, I decided I did not want to continue in that community. I would like to review the first part of it. Smelly code, yeah. Maybe I could. Is there a close? There's connect async. There's not a close async. Cancel connect async? No. This is the bit that I'm confused about, because why shouldn't I be able to do that? Because I'm reading and writing, but why is the error message coming from the send code? The only reason I can imagine why this begin sending throws an error here is because of a race condition-y type thing where this call gets closed as a result of this send callback before this is done executing or something. I mean, it's not erroring out here, and it's definitely leaving after the point where we closed the socket. Do we want to do that instead? I mean, I'm sure that that's actually, as they say, trading one problem for another, because now we get broken pipes, and while it's trying to send something while it's not connected. But again, why was it trying to send something? Maybe that is something that we can do something here maybe. Maybe we can debug this a little bit, and our hour of code won't be an entire waste because we will have learned something. I apologize if I am letting too much frustration jump into my head. Now, there's a begin sending, it's sending bytes, it's closing the connection, then it's beginning sending again. So why for is it calling begin sending a second time? I mean, I think we know why it's doing that right now, because I think I let this fall off the bottom. If I did this, so yeah, I know it's a bad file descriptor, but if I ran that, and we see a new incoming connection we read, send is called, it was began sending, then send is called again. So I guess because it receives, maybe there could be some magic race condition here, I guess. If we think about this, when messages go into the queue, they're just into the queue, and then we call begin sending once they come out. Begin sending needs to, we check here, it says that if the send buffer is null, it needs to do that, and then it's doing this. I'm going to just for now revert that because that's irritating. I know it's one way to fix it. I don't want to fix it that way. I want to put error handling in because error handling is a good idea, not because it's required just to stop a weird race condition from doing something dumb. So send just always enqueues something, and if it's not trying to send something right now, then it will call begin sending to kick it out into trying to do that, which seems like what it was doing. And here in begin sending, we do that. Now, if send buffer is null, we're not sending something, so we're going to do this. So maybe we could say, now this sort of makes me worried that there might be more than one thread going here. If the read happens in a thread and the send happens in a thread, and those threads aren't the same thread, then while this one thread has finished receiving a message, we put one to send. The receive thread keeps receiving messages, and then after it's done, its handler tries to send a message over the connection. Now, I mean, at some level, we could have more smarts. If the send buffer is null, that means it's going to try to pull something to send. We might say if close after sending return. Did I try this already? If there's nothing to send, and we were told that we were supposed to close after we're sending, don't try looking anything up. The only time this gets set is here, before it's about to do something. And as a matter of fact, we might even do it this way. I mean, I don't know that that necessarily matters. Only if there's multiple threads doing stuff, I suppose. In which case, we have a terrible race condition anyway. But, okay, so I'll leave that just so that that little green box is... Oh, I guess I already did that, huh? So if you called begin sending and it wasn't trying to send something already, then if it was trying to close after sending, don't try to send anything else, just leave, because the socket is in the process of shutting down. And if send buffer wasn't null, then somehow the socket was closed while it was sending, and that's actually the sort of error we actually care about. So, does that do anything nice? No, of course it doesn't. Now, unfortunately, the begin receive has to happen all the time. So maybe public bool connected equals false. How do we know when we're actually connected? Actually, I guess we're connected when these servers... Huh. When we accept a connection, we're the server end of this. So true, because we're connected. Okay, maybe we'll do it that way. And then we'll say if connected is equal to false, return. Don't try to send anything. And we'll even do this for our own edification. Cannot send, not connected, and we just leave. And begin reading if connected is equal to false, cannot read, not connected, and begin sending if connected is equal to false, then remove that one. And cannot begin sending, not connected. Now I should say cannot begin reading, not connected. Those operations, so the errors could still happen inside those threads. Oh, curse your broken pipe. Oh, this is just a headache, man. So there's no point in trying to stop yourself from doing something if literally every operation you take is on a thread, because then it doesn't matter. If we don't try to start the send, you can't try to cannot, well, let's say cannot queue message, not connected, right? Begin reading, cannot begin reading, not connected. But then we'll call begin receive. Begin sending, you can't begin sending because we're not connected. Read callback, are we going to say not connected in here? We have to call end receive. It's going to, that's what actually finishes the operation. So I don't think so. And this is the only thing that's actually wrapped here. So we might actually be smart about this whole operation at the very least, I suppose. If I did that and bumped all of this out and then copied that and pasted it here. Oop. What does that give us? Maybe I should restart the server first. Okay. Maybe that is the ultimate fix to this thing. What if I commented out all those things I just added? What if I commented out that and that? Like I say, there's no point in trying to guard against it if anything any thread does at any point after it's already started can cause it to throw an error. That leaves me wondering why exactly the test code didn't have anything like this in it. But that is, pardon me, that is, I think, good enough for now because we have blown almost 30 minutes on this particular action. We do want to keep close after sending. We don't really care about any of that, so that's just the way it was. We don't really care about any of that because that's the way that was. I have a sneaking suspicion that there's still a race condition there. And we want to keep that. I would imagine there's still a race condition there. Maybe in this case we don't want to use async sockets. Maybe we actually want to use some equivalent of select and have just one thread driving everything because threading woes are a lot far between. Maybe we need to lock on things when we do something. I don't know exactly what the best way to pull that off is, but that seems to have solved that problem. So, excuse me, let us come back up to here, and we changed quite a bit of stuff here, but if we wanted to do this in some sort of nicey kind of order, then maybe not that way, because, yeah. I'm kind of, did I not used to be able to, hang on, I need to make this window wider for a second. So the reason it doesn't work is that. Okay. I think I've. See, that still has no effect on anything. There we go. Does that also affect this? Yes. um, there were some changes recently that used to work in a way that it perhaps doesn't anymore. So let's just go ahead and leave that there because it's a lot easier for me to track changes when I can see them side by side and not stacked. That's been bugging me for a while. So what changed here? And as far as Git is concerned, this is not at all a helpful diff. It really seems like it might have noticed that the indent may not use the patience diff type thing, but this whole hunk is adding the try block to the read callback. So let's stage that hunk. And now if we look at things that are staged, the only things that are staged is read callback. So then we'll say add a catch block in the receiving code. Now, the fact that this solves the problem with the send thing as the only change really leads you to believe that, and this is what makes threading such a tricky problem to debug, is that maybe the read thread was the one that was causing the problem, but it was detected when another thread was the one that was running and things got a little discombobulated in there. I don't know. This adds a try catch block in the receive code that mimics what the code in the send code is doing. This was not present in the original version of the sample code. And it seems like it's actually a pretty good idea in the general case. Okay. Now we can do the other part, which is to say, if the message factory decided that everything that is a message has a close after sending, we could stage that. The message class implements it. It defaults to false. We stage that. The introduction message implements it and it defaults to false. We stage that. The error message implements it. It defaults it to false. We stage that. The handler doesn't have to do anything. And the build client, well, here we could stage these items here. And then we would say include the ability to close after sending a message. This includes the core functionality that allows any particular message to be flagged in a way that tells the sending code that once the send is complete, we should close the connection to the client. This is done so that we can control what the last message we transmit is while still making sure that it's us and not the client that's in charge of ending connections. In particular, we might want to close the connection after reporting an error, or to graciously hang up with a goodbye type message. Maybe we'll throw double quotes around that. but we need to make sure that we do it in a smart way because we don't know at any given point when a particular message will actually be sent. Here we make the message have a flag that indicates whether the connection, I'll break that, connection should be closed or not, and the send code closes the connection, closes the socket once that message is sent if the flag is set. And lastly, stage the hunk, hang up on the client. Well, do we really want to do that as an introduction message? Not the way that we've done it here. Let's unstage that. Because now we could actually get to the point of what we actually wanted to do that for. And that is the client is sending us, and how much time do we have? We are right at an hour. I'm going to go 15 more minutes. I like to run from 8 to about 9:30 to cover my rambling at the beginning, and we want to actually get something done other than watch me struggling with stupid async threading issues. So if we remember the client code over here in remote build, when it connects, it sends introduction message, and then it tries to send a particular message. Now, actually, a smarter thing to do there would be to stash the actual message, which we kind of have here, and have this send that message. But for our purposes, we really should be responding, but responding we should be sending an introduction message and waiting for the server to say what it's going to say before we commence our conversation, because we don't know if it's going to accept anything or not, right? But we do want to be able to handle the case at the server where the client crams stuff down the pipe without saying anything. Now, this introduction message is using the protocol version as defined by the client, right? So for our test purposes here, here's a couple of things that we can do here. And this is sort of what I had thought of previously. I'm going to close some of these. Just to get them out of the way. And maybe we'll shrink that back down a little bit and hide the sidebar so that we get our sides again. We're going to throw that out, but we might just shuffle that over there. Now over here, here we might say that there is a private bool has introduced, and it defaults to false, right? That should, Sublime bugs notwithstanding, compile. Yeah, okay. So here we might say, has the client transmitted an introduction message to us yet? We require one, or anything that the client does is otherwise considered to be an error. So here we might say private void verify introduction. Well, let's do it the hard way first. No. I don't like handling we're still going to echo messages back. If we receive an error message, yeah, here's the magic of our little state machine, right? Right now, those are the 3 messages we can get. It invokes up here. We might say this: if has introduced, then we might say, oh, you know what? We might do this: void send error for, and we maybe want to definitions of, oh, that was dumb. Not that one, this one. In this file, shuffle that over there. So uint32 is what we want. uint32 code and string error message. And we might say var error is equal to new error message, code error message, and error dot close after sending is true, and send error. Why? Because that's what we have there, but we're going to do this in more than one place. So transmit an error message to the user. Might even say this: close after equals true. Oh, bool. This isn't Python. Maybe we want to keep a connection open. That's why we made that a parameter, so that we can do this sort of thing. The connection will be closed once we finish transmitting this error, right? So if has introduced is set, then what we want to do is send error with, say, error code 1000. Introduction message has already been received. And return. We might say at this point, if message dot, and here we have to look at introduction message dot protocol version is not equal to, I mean, what do we know? Let's say 0. Just as a test. Then send error invalid protocol. Only version 0 is supported. And return. And if that's not the case, then has introduced is now equal to true, because we have been introduced. And we might do a void send message with a string message. And say send message. I guess technically speaking, this isn't really needed here, but we might want to modify this to take variable arguments and be like console.writeLine, but formatted itself. We're just not doing that right now. So that's a handy way to pull that off. And it makes this code look nicer. And in that case, we could say send message. Hello. And here we have to say, now in order to do it the other way, string.format that and message.user. And like so. And we're done. Now, Here's the part where you do something like this. Bool is introduced. We don't even need any arguments. We just say if has introduced is equal to true, then wish we had not done it in the Python way. That is a habit and a half. Otherwise, send error with the code 1002. How many errors have I already used here? These would have to be, like some sort of Boolean thing, right? 1002 and invalid. What do you want to say for an error message here? Invalid communications. No introduction message. No introduction received. And then we might return false. And the reason for that is so that we can say if is introduced, send message. And this one would do the same. And that means that these handlers automatically get mad unless they've been introduced. We could actually even be smarter. Excuse me. We could actually be smarter about it in the future and make dispatch say that if has introduced is false and the message is anything other than introduction, then just immediately send an error message and don't even dispatch the thing. It's probably the better way to do it. Yeah, what the hell? And then we maybe don't even need that message thing at all. We'll copy that out. Nope. If has introduced is equal to false and message.message ID is not equal to message type.introduction, in that exact case, send this error and return. Okay, so if we have not been introduced to the other end of the connection yet, then trigger an error unless this message is the introduction message itself. Okay, now we don't even need to do that. It's actually probably a better design until we realize that maybe are there other messages that we might want to do something like this with. Now we don't need a Boolean for that because if we want to know, we can just check the thing. Okay, error does not exist in the current context. What data do? Build handlers line 18. Oh, whoops. That's one. And a bad file descriptor. Now I know, I ran a build. You can complain about it. Non-invocable member message. Oh, line 23. Boy, I'm bad for that. Too much Python, I say. So what have we done here? We've modified the server. Maybe we'll actually make this smart or correct, if you will. What we really want to know is if we had an introduction message that we created ourselves, which would require all of those fields to be set. This version number should maybe be some sort of constant and not set there. But that's neither here nor there for the time being. There's only one protocol version, so Um, if the first message isn't an introduction message, then this trick code down here triggers. So the first thing that happens has to be an introduction. If a second introduction comes, it gets mad because that's already been received. If the introduction doesn't have anything, otherwise it says hello. So now we're going to go ahead and build that, and let's just test this in the client and then call it a night. So I'm going to do that, and now I think for our purposes we might clear this so we can see things nicer. When I run the command, we see, oh, look at that. It is not trimming things as it should. I forgot, or, uh, sorry, I thought I actually was doing that, come to think of it. But these are the messages that it's creating. Previously, it was echoing our messages like so. So that's perhaps something we can fix that, but well, maybe we will. Messages.py. Yeah. Let's just look and see what we got here. An introduction message. We are stripped those ones. We did not are stripped these ones. I think that it wasn't supposed to do that actually, because in one of these the message is variable length. So that might actually be a bug in our message CS class here. When we send it out, let's just take a look at it. Because again, all the messages that we were encoding something based on something that we had, right? So the first thing that we put is the 4 bytes. That is the length of the message. We create a message. We're going to need 2 for the type, 4 for the length, then the actual bytes. And the whole length of the thing is the length of that array minus 4 because it doesn't take itself into account. And then we get the 2 bytes for the type of message. We get 4 bytes for the message length, and we get message length bytes there. So that is actually kind of suspicious that this is happening. We can temporarily fix that anyway. Over here. .rstrip that, and still wants to do that, huh? It really thinks it's sending 23 bytes. So that is a confusion of epic proportions, realistically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Sent 81 bytes to client. Huh. Well, again, we don't want to screw around too much with this action. So let's go ahead and close that, clear that. I'll undo that for the time being because it shouldn't be something that should actually have to happen. We're going to quit Sublime entirely and restart it. And now there's our network loop. We will cd into remote build server and .NET run, because we probably rebuilt it. And when we run the thing, we see that it was connected. And then we get a hello, and then it echoes back. Now that, oh, maybe that's the username that we transmitted. Oh, that's the problem. Haha. Okay, maybe I will fix that just now. C# trim null bytes. Is that a thing we can do? Given the extra question, it sounds like you're fundamentally doing the right thing. In particular, yeah, nope, that is totally C# trim characters from end of string. Okay, what about that? Trimming and removing characters from string. Oh, there's a trim end. Does it do something cool? Does the trim end method removes all trailing occurrences of a set of characters? All right. It's very much like our strip. Cool, cool, cool. The only thing we have that has fixed messages right now is introduction.cs. And let's see. No, wait a minute. Am I thinking of this right? It's transmitting them with the username. No, it received the username and didn't trim it. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was thinking of here. So we're going to say username, password. Oop, no, no, no. Well, I guess we could do that. Dot trim end. And how do we like work this bad boy? Is there an example of it? Of course. Maybe we want an extension method for this, but we'll worry about that later. Char trim equals that. And how about that? Too many characters in character literal. I see. Maybe it needs to look like this. Okay. Kill that. Yeah, I know. Okay, restart it. Now we may begin to see some nice action. There we go. Okay. Now that is kind of hacky. So if we went to extensions, we actually want something on a byte array, but we don't know. Yeah. I guess it would just have to be a static function, wouldn't it? Not necessarily like public static string decode say get fixed with string, and it would take a byte array of bytes and an int start and an int size, let's say. And then we could do this. Go there like so, and then copy, say, one of those. I don't know if this is the best way to pull something like that. Get string data from start and size. Dot trim. There might even be a cooler way to do that now that I think about it. Get string. How many places does get string? There's an in32 and an in32. So let's see. Index and count. Yeah. So that seems to do one might expect. And then instead of this, we might call get. We don't need to do that, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I know. Oh. What did I do? Oops. Let's keep sneaking through. Oh, those ones don't have any. There's a problem. That's why that didn't work. We'll just do that. Yeah, okay, that's sort of what I expected, but I think I should be able to do that. The name data does not exist in the current context. It doesn't, just because I did that. Yeah, okay. There we go, and restart that server and run that command, and things still work. So that is an example of things doing what we want. We're connecting, we're sending a message, we're getting a response, and then it's happily echoing. Now, if, my goodness, I might need some more water here for my throat, or I'm really pushing the limits here. Here in our remote build, if we didn't send the introduction message first, and the first thing we sent was the message, that closed the connection because we restarted the thing. Server's still running. So if I run the command, I get an error 102, invalid communication, no introduction received. That's another one of the errors that we threw into one of these 1000D files. Let's close that. Let's close that. This one. So that got us the problem that we sent a message that wasn't an introduction message, so anything else we send it doesn't care about. So that's nice. If I did this instead of that, again, now that's clear that. Now when I do it, I get connected message hello, and then I get a new message that's an error message that says an introduction message has already been received. Don't do that. So that does what we might expect, which is also good. And as one last test, if I cut that, say m is equal to that, and then m dot protocol version is 2, and then send m. Then if we clear that build output and I go like that, we get an error that the protocol is invalid. So we're actually starting a conversation here. I'm going to revert that stuff back out because we do want it to just, do what it should do. And that is the starts of our handling and how we want to work things. A generic way to send an error, which we want to expand to, and I don't know if we want to have close after as true here. We maybe want to just always do that because we want this to be maybe a a var args. We maybe want this to be var args just to make those two things easier. Handling of one message is complete. If you have been introduced, you get mad. It gets mad because it's already happened. If it's not being introduced, but the protocol version doesn't match what we want, it gets mad. Otherwise, it responds with some sort of affirmative, which for right now is a message. We could actually define a more explicit message to return. Any message or error the client sends is just echoed back. Presumably, we might close the connection on error or something along those lines. The client really shouldn't be sending those to us. And our dispatcher can, based on the incoming message, invoke the appropriate thing and also make sure that all of these handlers, except for the one that is the introduction, make sure that it doesn't ever call them unless it's supposed to, so they don't have to do that themselves, because as we've seen, it's kind of redundant to have to do that in every single one. And we have also fixed, well, not fixed a bug in this thing by trimming values off. I think I have some code in there still that I, in fact, do not still need. This thing here can go away. But that, I'm going to say, is a pretty productive stream for an hour and a half of coding on stream with me coughing, getting mad at bugs, but actually getting conversations going. We're going to continue this more into tomorrow, get more of our action going, which I think is going to involve starting to work on spinning up configurations in the server code to be able to know where the cache directory is and iterate through that. That's also going to that's going to be required for us to store some sort of information that we can save and reload so that between runs we know what paths represent what. Um, that's probably fairly simple for us to do. Could be a little XML file or anything really. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to get the job done. That is going, however, to be the job for tomorrow's dev stream, where hopefully my throat tickle will be gone and hopefully other illnesses will not have taken over, if you will. I'm still going to do my best to try and do streams regardless, because I did make a promise to myself that I would try to do this for 31 consecutive days. And it's really not as taxing as I might have thought. I've habituated myself in a nice way. Nevertheless, I shall sign off now with my almost 2-hour video when I was only supposed to be, an hour minimum, by saying this is ODAT Nerd thanking you for watching and for liking and for subscribing, and wishing fervently for you to have a sublime day.